How's it going? Welcome to Wander on the Way, a show that is an ode to hours spent in coffee shops, late night get-togethers with friends, walks outside, and long car rides. Basically, all the times and places we get a moment to slow down to be present with ourselves and those around us. My name is Josh Perry, and I'll be your companion today for a little while. Join me and my occasional guests as we take a look at all the messy little details of being human. And remember, you're not lost as long as you say you're wandering. Welcome everyone. This is episode 4 of Wander on the Way, and it's part 2 of the conversation shows. And now, as much fun as these conversations are, they're also a bit of a learning experience for me. I'm still working out some of the bugs in my audio recording, and this one cost me a lot of time because of how it got recorded. I guess you could take that as a word of caution for yourself about making sure things are set up right before you record. Or you could take it as a word of presence to help you surf those feelings of frustration when you have more work in front of you than you'd like. Anyway, today's guest is Josué Quiñones. And I met him early in my career before he took up the calling to become a counselor and eventually speaker and performing artist. Right away, I was struck by his ability to weave a story when he spoke. And I think you'll agree as you listen to today's episode. JQ has had a wealth of experiences that have kept him dancing with his faith and following the constant journey that has brought him to this point and will take him to the next one. As you listen today, please remember to pause a moment and reflect on your own path. Think about where you might be going and what or who you're carrying along with you. All right, JQ, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Why don't you, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Josh. I'm glad
Yeah.
to be on this and to delve in this conversation with you today. But for those who may not know me, my name is Josué Quiñones, or JQ, as many of my friends, colleagues, students, and peers call me. Um, I'm an international speaker, artist, audio engineer, and I work part-time as an academic advisor at a local community college here in Westchester.
Nice. Yeah, we got kind of a oddly similar paths right now. I don't know if you knew or not, but I'm part-time kind of in higher ed still as well, and
Nice. Yeah, I
doing
feel
this
like
on
you
side.
told me that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you said you got the speaking, you're doing some audio production, you've recorded at least an album already, right? You're working on your second one?
Yeah, so yeah, I recorded. I mean, I've been writing and recording songs since I was like in the 7th grade.
Mhm.
But I hadn't released anything publicly until 2018, which is about what 3 years ago now, 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
Um, and so I have one album that is out and on the streaming platforms, and I just released a single um, on the 14th of January, so a couple
Hmm.
weeks ago, and I have the music video dropping for that either I think it's next week, and then I have some more music that's coming out, a couple projects. I don't like to share too much, but there's definitely some music coming out for
Yeah,
sure.
that's always I think people that are creative, you're playing on this balance between the excitement of wanting to like put it out there and tell people about it, but also the like I gotta hold something back and kind of create some hype for it.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, I would love to just like throw it out there, but then it's like once I
Hmm.
throw it out there, it's like, oh, okay, cool, we know already,
Yeah,
and I like to. It's like a dance.
that's cool. And I think the like the new single that you put out there is one of the areas that I was kind of hoping to chat about today, because I think it seems to me anyways like super JQ. right? It's you're talking about the journey and kind of how you got here and all the stuff you kind of came over. Briefly, do you want to talk a little bit about that song in case people want to go looking for it?
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of summarized it right, but it's called The Journey just because I mean, the last couple years, honestly, right? I feel like we've all been on a journey. I mean, we're all
Mm-hmm.
on a journey, right? We'll start there, right? We're all on a journey, and we call this journey life, right? And for me, just the last couple years with the pandemic and just what I've experienced has kind of cemented the fact that I'm still on a journey,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost it's like never ending, right? And so part of what I wanted to do with that song was one express what I felt like I've been going through, where I felt like I'm being called to. I feel like I'm in a transition, right? It's actually something I posted on my story on Instagram a couple weeks ago. Was that the calm is really a transition between two storms,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
I see.
yeah, the calm is really like a transition between two storms. And some people be like, well, that's not comforting in any way. But at the same time, each storm is really set up to prepare you for the next one,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so for me, I feel like I've been through quite a few storms in the last couple years, personally, mentally, emotionally, in my relationship. Um, and I feel like it's pulling me to the next storm. And I don't know what that necessarily is going to look like or what it's going to be. But one of the things that I feel like I'm learning and understanding is that it's where I'm supposed to go. And everything that I'm enduring, that I'm overcoming, that I'm experiencing is really set up to just teach me what I need to know
Mm-hmm.
before I get to the next space and place in life. Right now, I'm thinking about the book that I'm reading right
Mm-hmm.
now. It's called Right Use of Will. I forget the tagline all the time, but I think it's healing and evolving the emotional body. And I'm reminded of it, right? Because one of the things that I just read, in that book not too long, a couple of days ago, maybe yesterday even, was this idea that everything that happens is supposed to happen so that we can learn things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And even this idea of karma, usually people think of it as punishment,
Mm-hmm.
but karma isn't necessarily punishment. It's the experiences that you are bringing to yourself so that you
Mm-hmm.
can learn and express the parts of yourself that perhaps have been suppressed, and it's what you're supposed to have, right? Like anything that comes your way, it's what you're supposed to have for
Mm-hmm.
some reason. Um, and learning not to pass judgment, like that's huge. It talks about the release of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, like I'll openly admit I have been judgmental in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
and and I think more so on myself.
Yeah.
Like the hardest judgments I think I've ever passed have been on myself, and it hasn't been the healthiest thing. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm on this journey learning
Yeah.
to like release and let go of and accept, be more open and accepting
Yeah.
of myself, which is wild. But you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Like I don't
Yeah.
know.
Like there
I
may
don't
be
know.
like a biological thing there, right? Like judgment quite possibly exists because it has been useful to us, right? If you do something and something bad happens, then you try to prevent it from happening in the future or
Right.
pass that information on to like the next generation. Like, hey, don't do this thing. Like
Yeah.
thinking about our roles in higher ed, how much of our job is trying to help students not do the stupid stuff we did in college, right? Like that's kind
Legit.
of a
I mean,
thing,
that's kind of like my whole life purpose.
right?
It's legit, right? Because
Yeah.
my speaking is really about
Mm-hmm.
that, right? It's sharing part of my experience and my stories from the context of as a student,
Mm-hmm.
and as a person of color, to help others hopefully avoid some of those mistakes or change their life from
Mm-hmm.
their current point, moving forward. My music, it's literally all about helping others, and I
Mm-hmm.
share my own experience, um, with the goal and with the intent to help to affirm other people, validate
Mm-hmm.
them, but also help them understand that they're not alone,
Right.
and to hopefully inspire them to make change or do something different or avoid mistakes,
Yeah.
or pitfalls that I have. So absolutely. I
That
mean,
brings up
that's kind
an interesting question for me then, because like a lot of what you're trying to do, you said, is kind of sharing your experience, trying to connect with people, show them that they're not alone. Do you
Yeah.
think your work and your message would be as successful if people weren't making those same mistakes?
Ooh. Um. Hmm. That's a really good question.
Like I'm thinking
Um.
they relate to what you're doing because they're going through it,
Right.
and so
Right.
it seems almost like the value is that you are both kind of in that position, and yet you are further along, so you can kind of show the path out of it, so they have to struggle less. But it almost seems like getting into those situations is a vital part of kind of that journey. It's like you have to go and make the mistake in
Yeah.
order to come back out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think so. I think to some degree, yes. Um. I think it also can serve as sort of a warning. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like that word, but it's the best word I
Cautionary
could think
tale.
of right now. Yeah, like caution. Caution, I
Yeah.
think is great. Yeah, warning just sounds so
Mm-hmm.
negative. It's like caution, right? Like, hey, here's what could happen, right?
Yeah.
This may not be, and I think one of the things I've learned too is, when I share my story, I often say like, you may not be going through this exact same experience, but you have one
Mm-hmm.
similar,
Yeah.
right? Um, and and so yeah, I think it's kind of a cautionary tale of what could come,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I think of right, like I think of we'll go back to the song "The Journey," right? Some of the things that I talk about on that song, right, in terms of, um, you know, uh, friends might just step on my toes. Foes might attempt to get close. Friends might just step on my toes. Might
Mm-hmm.
disconnect from the bros. They feel some contempt in it shows, right? Some people may not feel that. They may not
Mm-hmm.
have experienced that. So it may be a caution that as you progress on your journey, those things could come,
Yeah.
right? And I know that because I've experienced that.
Yeah. Sure.
Um, and so, yeah, damn, that was a really good question, man. I love that. Yeah, because
Good.
I think on one hand, right, like the value is in like I'm going through this experience. Oh wow, they've been through this, and
Mm-hmm.
look where they're at. Like there's hope. And I think there's also value in like, oh man, this is a journey that I'm thinking about, or this is a journey I'm currently on. I haven't
Mm-hmm.
experienced that, but that may come, so I should, take heed because this may be helpful in helping me to navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, yeah, great question, man.
Yeah. You mentioned a second ago about reading this new book, and that you
Mm.
just came off of reading another book that you really liked. You want to
Yep.
touch on what that one was a little bit and what you
Yeah.
liked about it?
Yeah. So prior to this book, I was reading "Ego Is the Enemy" by I think it's Ryan Holiday. Um,
Ah.
and it's I loved it because again, being transparent and honest, ego is something that I've struggled with, but I never really realized I did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always saw ego as like this boisterous and like
Mm-hmm.
strong and like in your face
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I don't see myself that way. Like I don't see myself as someone who's in
Yeah.
your face and big and grandiose. I don't see myself that way. So I never really thought ego was something I struggled with. And I came to actually first I think my first exposure to the idea that I may struggle with ego was actually in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
My therapist brought it up. I don't even remember what I said to her, and she was just like, "How did she?" I forget how she brought it up. Um, I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. I just remember she brought up ego, and I was like, "Oh," I was like, "I don't know." It's like maybe. She was like, "Yeah, you should probably dig into that, for next session or whatever." And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yo," and it sent me on this like somewhat of a spiral around me and my ego, and
Mm-hmm.
like I struggle with ego. How? Like, but I'm like, and sort of my identity as to some extent of like how I understood myself. Um, and then I started to see how it caused struggles in my relationship. I started to see how it actually is what prevents me sometimes from taking action on certain things because I'm so concern with myself and my image and how people look at me and how
Mm-hmm.
people understand me, how people perceive and receive me, I didn't realize that that was ego.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's all ego. You're so consumed by yourself and
Yeah.
what your image looks like and I never understood it that way, um, because it's so subtle,
Mm-hmm.
and so what I loved about this book was really helped me to understand that ego is very subtle but very powerful at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may not feel grandiose, but that's the kind of impact that it can have.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the book, the author, he gives like different stories of well-known people and like generals in military, and how their egos sort of prevented them from being successful, or if they were successful, it then brought them down
Mm-hmm.
from their success. Um, and so, just I think one of the most humbling things that I got from that was, I wish I remember the quote, but essentially it was like, you're not as important as you probably think you are.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, that's real.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think then also coupled with another concept and idea is the immensity, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says, stay connected to the immensity of it all. And that idea is really like, when you think about the vastness, the bigness
Mm-hmm.
of the world, life, existence, how important are you really? Like, and that's not to say that we're not important, right? That's not to
Yeah.
say that you're not an important piece of this existence we call life, but the level and degree of importance that we probably give ourselves, so I'll speak for myself, that I give myself, it ain't that big. Like, I gotta
Yeah.
come down, humble myself quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
And to think about the generations of my own family that have come before me, right? Like, I am a product and result of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know how far back. Like, I have no concept of how
Yeah.
far back this thing goes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
really like the stuff you're saying, and it's something that I think about a lot myself.
Mm.
Um, and oddly is something that I often try to pass on to people in conversation, or especially students, because it's, to me, it feels a bit like an antidote for um, maybe the past 30 years or so of like everybody is unique and special, that really can weigh very heavily on us. Like, if you're convinced that you're unique and special all the time, and then you do something that you come up short, like that can crush a student or somebody, and
Yeah.
not even a student. um what I find, and I can hear you struggling with it yourself as you're talking about it, is it's very hard not to have that attitude and avoid sliding into like everything sucks, like the kind of that
Mm.
nihilistic attitude where you're like, well, if nothing is special, then why do I care at all? And for me, the way I usually try to put this kind of thing out there is like, if you're not as important as you think you are, that should be liberating. Like, that means you don't have to care as strongly or as deeply in what other people think. Like, just go do the thing that you that brings you life, that like brings you happiness and joy and stuff. And like, if you do a mediocre job, great. That's fine. Like, don't stress out. Don't freak out that you're not LeBron James, right? Be you.
Yeah. 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 No, absolutely. And it is something that I have struggled with for quite some time, and I'm learning to accept, right? It's like, I think you said it, be you, be who you are. You are who you are.
Mm,
Yo, I think of this interview I watched, I think sometime last week. Um, and the guest, his name is Myron Golden,
mm,
and he broke down the concept of, well, I don't know if it's the concept of success, maybe, but it's be, do, have, right? And he basically says that if you be who you're supposed to be
mm,
and who you were meant to be, then you will do what you are supposed to do and what you were meant to do, and therefore you will have what you are meant to have and what
mm,
you're supposed to have, right? And so it all starts with being.
Mm.
Um, and so just yeah, I think for me, I'm learning to just be who you
Yeah.
are. That's it. Like, and let that evolve as it will.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The hard part I think a lot of people deal with an attitude like that is you convince yourself backwards of like, well, I'm supposed to have this. Like
Yep.
everybody's telling me that I'm going to have a good family, I'm going to have a good job, I'm going to have all these toys, like whatever it is, and then you work that up in your head, and so when you're not getting that, you feel somehow broken or like that's not where you're supposed to be. Um,
Or lied to.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And um, so trying to flip it, I think, is really good and healthy, right? To do the things that you're doing, and a lot of people probably have a hard time with that because they build up that ego, that image, based on what they think is owed to them, as opposed to kind of who they are, and you don't do that work to kind of figure it out ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think we're not, like, this is where I think we're not taught to. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
I
Like,
think
I
that's right.
think to some degree, and I understand, right? Like, I get it because the external world, in a way, functions that way, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
about what you do, what you can produce,
Mm-hmm.
the job you have, the money you make, and so I think in a lot of ways we're trained, we're socialized to think in that way, um, and not often encouraged to just explore yourself, so
Mm-hmm.
that you can then, um, how do I say it? Like, explore who you are, so then that you can then attach yourself to the things that you're supposed to be doing, and that will
Mm-hmm.
produce all those other things, right?
Sure.
Like, I was telling a student this the other day, and I've said it to students before. It's like, oftentimes when we think about career and we think about jobs, it's, oh, that job does X, Y, and Z. I want that job
Mm-hmm.
because it does all that. And it's so much more powerful when we could say, this is who I am, this is what I value, this is what's important to me, this is what I
Yeah.
enjoy, this is what I care about. Oh, that allows me to do all those things?
Right.
Then that's where I want to go. That's,
Yeah.
which for me is like, that's how I gravitated towards counseling. That's how I gravitated towards speaking. That's how I gravitate towards music, because I value making a difference. I
Mm-hmm.
also value using my voice and being able to speak up, because it's something that I struggle with for a long, long, long time. Um, and I value affirming others, because
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like not to be affirmed. And when
Yeah.
I finally was affirmed, it was like, yo, this opened the whole world for me, And so that's why I've gravitated to those things.
I definitely see kind of a hunger for that expression and the connection that's out there that is maybe has been neglected for a little bit too long. And it seems like there's more people that want to have that kind of conversation for sure.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's more of an openness to exploring that. Part of me thinks the pandemic kind of pushed that,
Yeah,
right?
that's probably right.
Because I do. I've since it started, I was like, yo, this has forced people to really sit with themselves
Mm-hmm.
in some ways. Um, I mean, and there's layers to that too, right? Because then there's other folks who it just exacerbated everything that was happening, and so it gave them even
Sure.
less time to be able to sit with themselves. Um, seriously. So, but I think that this idea of, like, there's got to be more. It's got to be in terms of purpose, not in terms of
Mm-hmm.
material world, but like this, it's got to be something deeper, right? Like, um, and I love that. I love that. I think, you know, yeah, I don't know. I agree, but I
Mm-hmm.
also see that there's probably people that are like, for what? Like, material world is where they're stuck in, and
Yeah.
um, what comes to mind for me is it's all about balance.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about balance. Um, and but until we speak with other people, we don't necessarily have an opportunity to pop the bubble a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
or expand. Maybe not even pop it, just expand it to include
Right.
more. Um, and so I love how, that's why I like this. That's why I was so excited about this, right? Because even as I'm talking with you, you bring up perspectives and ideas
Mm.
that I hadn't even considered, and I love that, because it's about expansion.
Mhm.
Um,
I
so
came across a concept, I don't know, a few months back. That might be worth looking into deeper. Even for me, I barely touched it, but it was called thirdness, and this kind of idea that like bringing two people together, for example, that there's a third thing that kind of emerges from
mm,
that that doesn't exist prior. And so I totally,
mm,
that idea of having conversation, even conversation between like-minded people, like you and I have a different body of literature that we've read. We've got different lived experiences, we've got different upbringings and that kind of stuff, um, and all of that kind of is brought to bear in the conversation. So you get to see the interplay of all of those ideas. It's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah, I love that. I've never heard that concept, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it
I
was totally
agree.
new to me.
Yeah, I love that. And right, it makes me think of this idea of energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are energy. We carry energy, and then when we merge that or bring it together, kind of like you said, when we bring that together with someone else's energy, it creates something different, something new. And then if someone else were to join this
Mm-hmm.
conversation, right, it's going to add to that energy or take away depending, right? But it's again creating something new.
Something
It
different.
creates something, yeah, something different. Um, thirdness, I love that though.
It's a neat word.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's dope.
we'll take a look. And then I guess one of the last things I wanted to touch on, like we kind of hit on journaling and speaking and music and all of these areas that you get to kind of use your voice, and that is really appealing to you. But you just snuck in for a second there, and I know you kind of wanted to talk about this earlier. The you said you had the Bible app on your phone, so
Yeah.
what's that meaning for you in these days, and how does that factor into your kind of daily life?
Um, yeah, so honestly, spirituality is something that I have been on a journey
Mm.
with. I can't get away from that word now, right? But I've been on a
You're
journey with.
branded.
I mean, yeah, literally. When when I think about my faith and spirituality, it's been an ongoing journey, and I'm thankful for it though, because like I mean, as a kid growing up, I was raised Catholic, right? So I went to Catholic church with my mom on Sundays. I went to Catholic school from first grade all the way till end of high school, but I never really absorbed any of that.
Hmm.
It was kind of like, oh, this is just what you do, whatever. I spit it out. I got 90s in religion class because all I had to
Hmm.
do was just regurgitate what I was being told and taught. Um, and it wasn't until college really where I started to really explore the concept of God
Hmm.
and who he is, what it is, you know. Um and most of it is because of my own life experiences, right? Like, not to get into too much of it, but when I was a student in college, I didn't know what I was doing.
Hmm.
Um, and I thought I wanted to do business, and that wasn't working out. And then I said, well, the whole point of college is so you can, yeah, get a degree, but the idea is really to get a job and make money. So the end result is money. So how do I get to the end result as fast as I can?
Right.
And I chose to do some of the things that other people do to get to money really quickly, which is not very advisable, and is illegal, but because that was the purpose, right? So how do I get
Hmm.
there quickly? And through that experience, I realized that I was becoming somebody that I wasn't comfortable with,
Hmm.
that I didn't identify with. And something that I believe is that I believe that we all have an image of ourselves in the future. That's who we truly are. Like
Sure.
I believe it's somewhere in us. We just haven't explored it. Again, that self-exploration. We know who we are, and we know who we're meant to be. We just don't explore it. It gets suppressed, or it gets quieted, or we get
Interesting.
distracted from it. And so, um, I remember sitting on a Coach USA bus, and this is I share this as part of my speaking engagements. But I was sitting on a Coach USA bus, and I had just enough money to go back and re-up and continue living this lifestyle that I had chosen.
Hmm.
Um, and honestly, I've come to believe like God spoke to me in that moment and was like, "Yo, you could do that, but that's gonna be who you're choosing to become."
Hmm.
Or you can get rid of the money and just do something else. Just do something else. Just get rid of the money and don't choose that.
Hmm.
And because I mean, I was just sitting there. I was just sitting on a bus. I had headphones on. I don't even remember where I was going out. And I just heard, I'm sorry, but I heard. I'm not sorry, but I heard that. Like I heard,
Hmm.
You could choose to do this, and that's going to be who you will become, or you could get rid of the money and you can just do something else.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that strongly, and so that's where I started to begin saying, all right, the God's real, because there's no way, like, nobody planted that seed, nobody, like, I heard that. So for me, I believe that, there is something higher than us. I call him God because I do believe that you know, that's what I've been trained, but that I believe that. I believe there is a God, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
man, woman, female, or even a person. I believe that a God exists. And so in addition to that, there's so many different ways of believing in God, right? We
Mm-hmm.
call it different things. We call it the universe, the spirit. We call it, Allah. We call it Yahweh. We call it God. We call it the one, whatever. For me, it's like, all right, let me start exploring some of these things because there's truth somewhere.
Yeah.
There's truth. Whether it's this way or that way or that way, I'm not here to argue any of that. I don't want to argue any of that. But I believe there's truth. I believe there's something. So, for me, Christianity is what I have gravitated towards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's what I've begun to explore. And so, I hear a lot. I still follow that church that was shared with me. I watch
Sure.
with them every Sunday. I participate with them, but even in that, I'm still exploring for myself. And so one of the ways is like, yo, let me actually read the Bible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let me actually read it. Like, just actually read it. And so I've begun that. It just so happens that this app has a plan called 365 Days with the Bible. And so you
Okay.
read a couple chapters every day. And I was like, this is perfect. I can, in 1 year, I can go through the entire Bible. And it doesn't have any, because usually when people talk about or teach the Bible, like they pick out certain things and they talk
Right.
about, like they give you a lesson from what they've taken out. This thing
Mm-hmm.
is literally just read through it. That's it. Here's a couple chapters, read through it and see what happens for
Yeah.
you. And so I love that because for me, I'm reading it and it's like, oh, this particular section made me think about this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I write about that. Yo, this made me think about this. This made me think about that. This made me, realize this right now, or this brought this to mind. And that's kind of how I'm going through it. And I love that because for me, at least, I think it's my own experience with it. Um, and I kind of want to do that with all the so-called religious texts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of want to do that with all of them. Um,
Oh,
just to
there's
see.
tons to go into it.
Yeah, no, I know. I probably won't even get through all of them in my lifetime, but I do. I want to kind of go through them and just because I believe there is a truth to life,
Yeah.
you know. And they say God is the truth, the way and the light, right? Like that's what's said about. Okay, so let's find truth. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's part of my journaling practice. It's because again, I think who I am comes out of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I'm a big fan of that approach too. The like just sit down with the text and see kind of what comes up. Because I think you brought up something that is really true, and I think pushes a lot of people away from looking at religious thought, and that is oftentimes it comes to you with a lens already built into it. Like somebody has an agenda and they've picked out their quote or their example that pushes or backs them up, right? um
Yeah. Yep.
and oftentimes a lot of those people, like, you could go back to their same source material and find the contradictory bit of information, and so you kind of are left with this like, I don't know about this guy. um but
Yeah.
somehow, like,
Yeah.
sitting with it yourself without the annotations, let's call them,
Hmm.
like I think it gives you a deeper appreciation for the work itself, just as like a piece of text, right? um and I know, like, especially with issues surrounding the Bible in the US or in the West, like there's a lot of people that will argue that, well, even the translations we're working with have um heavy lenses and biases built into them already. So okay,
Yeah.
fine, but still, you got to start somewhere, and that's kind of, I like that approach of just sitting down with the text and seeing what it brings up for you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think, right, because something that comes up for me too is like the history of it. right?
Yeah.
And how it's been used as manipulation and all these other
Hmm.
things, and the reason for massacres and justification for all these.
Hmm.
I still want to read it. I just want to read it because there's what the like why
Right.
like why, right? And yeah, it's I think part of it too is I think just searching for, like you said, the truth and what's meaning, searching for purpose, searching for something to hold on to, I guess, for lack of a better term. Because what comes to
Hmm.
mind for me in this moment is this idea, and it's something that I learned. We're in 2022, right? So I learned this 2020. Um, I had a friend who passed, and one of the things that I learned was like, yo, the moment you give up faith or hope, what else is there,
Hmm.
right? Like once you let go of those, what else is there?
Hmm.
And so I think, and faith, we don't have to think about it in a religious or spiritual term,
Sure.
right? Just those two concepts, faith and hope, period. Like once you
Hmm.
let those things go, I don't think you hold on to anything else really.
Right.
Um,
It
and
could
so I
even
think
just
that's
be
part
the
of it.
the faith that things are going to be better than they are now, or something like that.
Right, right. But once you let that go, what else is there? I
Hmm.
don't know. Right. And so I think that's part of it too, is like finding something that maintains one's faith and one's hope. Um, and so, yeah, whatever that is, as long as it's not impeding, I think that's where the line gets drawn, right? Because a lot of people, like, I have a friend who's like, yo, nah, I can't get into that because people got killed over that and it's not right. And people justified it. And,
Hmm.
and indoctrination and institutionalization, which is all for me, it's again
Yeah.
something I've learned too, is like it's both and, right?
Right.
Like yes, that too, and there's also this. So let's, like you said, let's dig into both,
Hmm.
to find truth. And so yeah, man, I probably could talk about this for a long time.
Yeah, it sounds like we had another conversation that we gotta
Word.
tackle down in the future. So maybe we'll come back around to this and
Yeah,
dig into it straight away. Um,
yeah,
but why don't we kind of start to wrap things up a little bit from there? I think that's a good note to go out on. So
yeah,
one,
word. But yeah, that's, I mean, I think we've talked about the essence really is like I'm depth. That's who
mhm,
I am. That's what I enjoy. So I don't know that there's anything
yeah,
outside of that.
yeah, I think if that's definitely kind of a key value, you're gonna find it in everything, right? It doesn't matter what it is. If it gets your attention, it's because it has that depth that you're looking for.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to thank you again for coming on today. This is a great conversation. I had a great time. And I wanted to give you a quick opportunity. If people are looking for JQ, where do they go?
I'd say Facebook, Instagram, JosueJQQuinones, Josué JQ Quiñones. That's how you find me on Instagram, Facebook. Um, and then if you want to check out my website, www.successisalifestyle.com. Those are the best places to catch me, and you'll find links to music and all that other stuff, through either one of those avenues.
Awesome. So thank you for your time. We will say, like, this was not planned that you were coming out with like a new single and dropping a
Nope.
music video to it. This isn't like you're on some sort of publicity tour. It just worked out that way. But
Word.
definitely check it out. I think that song represents so much about who you are and kind of the conversation we had today. And I just think it was perfectly timed. So, maybe
Yeah.
that's one of those things that you're talking, like, just happy accidents in life.
Yeah, for real. Cause there's more to come too, right? So yeah, it was meant to be, and I couldn't have planned it. That's why I say it gotta be God. I didn't do that. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And for any of you listening out there, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Once again, thank you to my guest Josué JQ Quiñones for sharing a few moments from his journey with us today. I always enjoy the opportunities that I get to chat with him, and I hope you enjoyed getting to listening. Check him out on his socials at Josué JQ Quiñones, or take a look at his website, www.successisalifestyle.com. And thank you for listening to the podcast and carrying the conversation out into the world. Music for this podcast is generously provided by Alexander Nakarada at www.serpentsoundstudios.com and is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Details in the description. If you'd like to come join the community, be a guest on the show someday yourself, you wish to support the podcast, or just get in touch, find me online at wanderontheway.org. And until next time, go have a good conversation.